Friday, the 7th of February, 2025. Friday. I'm just kidding. I say that every single week. And well, when I do videos on Fridays, so much in the news. And excitingly, a lot of the news that people like myself have been talking about for years is making mainstream media. And I can't even believe it. I mean, I can, but to certain degrees, there's still like a lot of information that still needs to get out there. But it's starting to happen. And before I even get into that, like I was talking with another friend of mine who works in CBSA just this morning, and I was sharing something with her regarding an old story regarding a border security agent out of BC. This is like from like 2007 era, but that was caught drug smuggling, like large amounts of drugs, like cocaine, for example, and things like that, and who knows what else. And I gave the names and stuff like that. But this was like from a Canadian news outlet, and she wasn't able to access it. So I explained to her, especially as someone that works within government, especially within CBSA, especially in her department, right, where there's important information that is not being accessed, and it's because of the censorship, right? And so I told her that she should get a VPN, a virtual private network, and because it gives you a different IP address, it's more secure, it's more safe, it allows you to see more data that's not censored. And in Canada, what you can do to get away from the censorship as well is to connect to a different country. And so I explained how to do that and stuff like that. But I've done courses on that. And so I just want to bring one up just as an example of a course I teach. It's called Hostile Environment Awareness Training. And it's not opening. Maybe if I expand it, bear with me. Okay, there we go. Took me a while. So I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to maximize the screen, so I'm not going to be able to see anyone's comments. But this is just kind of like a template for me for when I teach HEAT or even SRDT, which is the Standing Rapid Deployment Team courses, or countless other courses. What I do is I tailor make it depending on the organization that I'm providing the training for. And so this is another example of that, right? So for hostile environment awareness training, I would be teaching it drastically differently if I was teaching people within the military, especially the higher levels, or special forces types, as opposed to law enforcement types, depending on what organization they're from, whether it be municipal, whether it be provincial, whether it be federal. And then media. I think that mainstream media should be getting this course. Absolutely, especially because they're traveling to multiple different countries to report, independent journalists, etc. And they're not given the proper training or qualifications in order to properly do their jobs and be safe while they're at it. And so even within CBSA and emergency management teams, I'm saying even NGOs, like they need this course, Red Cross, United Nations, etc. And so how I teach, again, it's tailor-made to the audience. And there's more or less information provided depending, again, on the organization. So what I go through is pre-deployment, arrival and orientation, in the field, crisis management, surviving captivity, and post-deployment. I'm going through these like really fast. I give scenarios. The module covers mission analysis, context analysis, risk assessment. So this is why I'm getting into this part, and then I'm going to shut this down. Information sources, security plans for business users, deployment documentation, medical considerations, equipment requirements, things like that. But again, looking at the risk analysis, information sources, risk assessment, all of that stuff, if you are very limited in what you can access, even when you're working within the highest levels of government in Canada, it is disturbing. You should not be censored or not allowed to get this data. And then unfortunately, when people like me give people within government data that goes against what the narrative is that's being pushed, then we get labeled as conspiracy theorists or tinfoil hat wearers, or we don't get hired for jobs that we've done for many years in the past. And anyway, so many things to consider. And so again, this is a course that I would like to be teaching again, contracts for. And again, because of not being vaccinated, that originally prevented me from getting these contracts. And now it's because, again, I've been talking about what's going on with Russia, Ukraine. I'm not going to teach courses where I'm lying to people about what actually went down during certain events, right? So when I teach about responding to natural and or man-made disasters or events, yeah, again, I'm not going to cave and just look at mainstream media for what happened, right? I'm looking at so many different sources of information in order to come to conclusions. And I'm going to just share just an example of my file folder. I'm going to have to bring it up though. Again, and that's like, it takes a while to build these packages. I have countless packages, and I really wish that people would come around. And so how I break it down, this is just in my folder. Like I'll do like theoretical, practical, administration, course logistics, all in different file folders. This folder is empty right now because I have it all here for the moment. Yeah, that one is too. Anyway, HEAT, 5 principles of security, comms, do's and don'ts, questions, vehicle safety. Like I get into a lot of stuff. I give video demonstrations as well. And actually, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, but I want to see, because some of the file folders I do break down further. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so just to give you an example. Anyway, so 2-day practical, different, again, things that are required for the people that played certain roles. Again, I've hired people that are part of like fire departments, business owners, including restaurant owners, law enforcement, multiple different departments and agencies, military, multiple different agencies within the or careers within the military, veterans, security, you name it. And yeah, I won't get too much more into that, but so there's it's train as you fight type thing. And then even for like the theoretical part too, facilitator guides, maps, news articles that I create, participant guides, PowerPoints. Anyway, team rotations, team prep, satellite comms, all that stuff. And so if you're interested in these courses, let me know. So now on to mainstream media. Well, I say mainstream media, but some of these people aren't fairly mainstream. They are more independent, but again, they get a lot of views, so that's why I call it mainstream. And I'll start with Russell Brand, because again, he's no.
Castrated. Now we have proof and evidence that COVID came from a laboratory. Of course, it bloody well did. And the legacy media themselves admit it. But where are they on Albert Bourla's new claim that we can fight a literal war against cancer in our bodies using new bespoke cancer vaccines? And if we trusted them then, and they lied to us, why should we trust them now? But remember, when Anthony Fauci used to claim things like this.
A fairly large group of very well-respected evolutionary virologists have examined epidemiological, virological, geospatial data from Wuhan and have come to the conclusion, not definitively by any means, but feeling that it is much more likely that it is a natural occurrence from an animal to a human.
There you go. That's what media used to look like. Anthony Fauci lying to Jim Acosta. He said it plainly and confidently. This is some reporting from Ashley Rinsberg that helps us understand how that story unfolded. And I'd like to offer you this. If that's what the medical establishment and legacy media were telling us then about COVID, how can we trust what Albert Bourla is telling us now about cancer vaccines? Let me know in the comments in the chat. The media didn't just get COVID-19's origin wrong. They deliberately shut down legitimate inquiries, smeared anyone who questioned the official story, and ran cover for the institutions most responsible for the pandemic. Now, after years of gaslighting the public, the CIA has quietly admitted that the virus most likely came from a lab. This isn't just a media failure, it's the most successful propaganda campaign in modern history.
I would say it was a very successful propaganda campaign, which is what this video is about, for the most part. But I would say that the shape of the earth is a bigger one. And moon landings.
For years, if you even suggested COVID-19 might have leaked from a lab, you were labeled a conspiracy theorist. We remember that, don't we? We remember that label, those campaigns, those smearings, those attacks, those peculiarly funded odd online organizations and operations. We remember Moderna and Pfizer talking about people that were spreading misinformation in leaked reports. We learned a great deal during that time. We saw talk show hosts dressing up. We saw people telling the truth censored.
We saw people like Justin Trudeau, our leader, you know, calling us misogynists and so many other awful names, and you will get vaccinated, all that stuff. And Chrystia Freeland as well, calling us terrorists. Again, I've got the receipts because even with notes that she made, I've shared that on Twitter. It's getting further released by people like Tamara Leach, and then even Marco Menincino and David Lametti with talking about employing tanks on innocent civilians. I just couldn't even believe it. And again, not even just innocent civilians that were peacefully protesting. I'm going to reiterate that, but there were also plants, embeds, crisis actors, role players that were within government and not with government that were also in the crowds, and so they would also be inflicting harm on them as well. And people that live in the downtown core, just to be clear, people that are walking to and from work or driving to and from work, or visiting people or getting groceries. And Bill Blair has done that before, where he has profoundly impacted Toronto, for example, during the G20 summits in 2010, I believe it was 2010 or 2014. Anyway, the mass protests and picking people up, snatch and grabs, people from other government agencies, even wearing all out black, you know what I mean, to be covert, just snatching people up and detaining them for hours on end, or even canalizing them in a zone and then arbitrarily arresting even people, again, that were going into their homes or going into restaurants, had nothing to do with the peaceful protests, and then with the crisis actors that were also used, and burning of the police vehicle, and politicizing it and making it some kind of a again, sensational event.
Since then, we've seen Mark Zuckerberg do an about turn. Since then, we've potentially seen the HHS radically revolutionized by its main detractors, and the people that were outside of the court reified and elevated to positions of power. So much has changed, but have we seen the investigation that's warranted, and have we seen the culpable taken to task? Worse, you were called racist, a career-ending accusation in today's world. This wasn't an accident. It was a coordinated effort designed to silence debate and protect powerful interests. The media, the US government, and the Chinese Communist Party all played a role. Sounds like a pretty vast conspiracy theory to me, the idea that big pharma, government, and the media would all work together to control a global narrative, potentially control a global disease, use it to inaugur citizen management and mass control. Pretty extraordinary. It started in early 2020. As the virus spread, the Chinese government immediately pushed the idea that it came from a Wuhan seafood market. There was no evidence for this. In fact, the first major study on the outbreak published in The Lancet showed that a third of early cases had no connection to the market. At first, the New York Times and Science magazine reported this honestly. Then everything changed. Now, the fact that there was a pivotal moment suggests that it was deliberate, because early reporting appeared to be somewhat organic, unlike the virus, which was made in a lab, plainly, which they could have told us at the time. In late January, Senator Tom Cotton cited the Lancet study in a Senate hearing, raising an obvious question. Could COVID-19 have come from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, China's only biosafety level 4 lab, which was studying bat coronaviruses? Cotton didn't claim the virus was a bioweapon. He didn't even...
Not a gain of function? Yes. Lab leak? Yes.
To say the lab leak was certain. He simply asked a question. And here is Tom Cotton doing exactly that.
Still don't know where it originated. Could have been another seafood market. Could have been a farm. Could have been a food processing company. I would note that Wuhan also has China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that works with the world's most deadly pathogens, to include, yes, coronavirus.
In a sense, he's making the point that Jon Stewart would eventually successfully make, that it was like an explosion of chocolatey goodness in Hershey, Pennsylvania. On February 9th,
and even Athens, Georgia, with gain of function being conducted on the bird flu virus. That's known. Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we had Chinese nationals with top secret government clearance scientists that were also involved in Winnipeg with corruption there as well.
CBS News host Margaret Brennan interviewed China's ambassador to the US. Instead of pressing for answers, Brennan served up the key talking point. Senator Tom Cotton suggested the virus may have come from China's biological warfare program. That's an extraordinary charge. How do you respond? Cotton had never said that, but the ambassador seized the moment. He called the lab leak discussion dangerous and warned that it could lead to rumors, xenophobia, and racial discrimination. Just 2 days later, China's state-run China Daily published an editorial condemning the rumors that COVID-19 came from a lab. And just like the ambassador, they played the racism card, warning that the accusation could fuel racial discrimination. Here are some of those headlines from the time. Both ran headlines designed to mock and delegitimize him. Where did they get this framing? From Beijing. The Washington Post and New York Times didn't expose Chinese disinformation. They amplified it. Now, many of us are very
so did USAID.
familiar with these stories and this kind of reasoning. We've known for a long, long while. I feel like I was 12 years old when I knew that thing came out of a lab. But what we need to pay attention to is what are the people that told us that then telling us that now? Well, what's Albert Bourla been saying lately? One thing he's pretty convinced of is that we should all be taking cancer vaccines. Now, let me know in the comments and chat. Do you trust Albert Bourla, the man who gave you moonshot, the man who profited extraordinarily from the pandemic after saying that he wouldn't when it comes to cancer? Let me know in the comments and chat.
First, I need to tell you that I'm super excited about the prospects of life sciences, exactly because of that. It's not only advancements in biotechnology, but also advancements in digital technology. But the two are colliding, and they are going to create tremendous synergistic effects. I'm going to use an example of a disease that worries all, the emperor of all maladies, cancer.
My favorite disease, in fact, because it's the disease which I can most imagine making profit from. Cancer, king of disease. King Penguin, king of penguins. If only we could have penguin cancer marching through your veins and then create a vaccine from that. What? It's impossible? A king penguin living in people's veins causing cancer? It's possible, though. It's a moonshot. We might just be able to do it. What a brilliant rant, Albert Bourla. That's how the legacy media would probably respond if Albert Bourla proposed releasing king penguins into our bloodstream to cause, then cure cancer. What he is claiming is somewhat less ludicrous than that, but it's still pretty preposterous. The merging of potentially dangerous AI technology with potentially dangerous mRNA technology, not confronting the fact that we've just gotten over a pandemic where scientific research likely created a problem that it subsequently tried to claim credit for curing when it didn't really cure it at all, and potentially generated a cure that made the disease worse, causing, among other things, potentially, well, certainly myocarditis, certainly miscarriage, potentially turbo cancers. We got a vaccine for that.
Senolytics are the biggest discovery for promoting healthy aging. The aging process obviously isn't our friend, unless I suppose, there's eternal essence cells, known as cellular level.
Technology that we are using, which is called ADC, antibody drug conjugate. I'm going to use, because we have marked here, military terms to describe the war on cancer.
And also because we are at war with humanity and life itself, and we see freedom, life, and the human spirit as the kind of enemies to our Luciferian power.
The problem is that when you use the chemotherapies, that they are most common used drugs right now for cancer, you are not killing only the cancer cells, but you are killing also the healthy cells. So you need to be more precise.
It's probably every time you agree with Albert Bourla, acknowledge it. So that's one of the times I agree with Albert Bourla.
So that's why we developed something like a GPS-guided missile, a medicine that is very precise.
It's like a missile with which I can control entire populations while profiting.
We try, first of all, to identify a target that will identify that this is what we want to kill and shoot. So, for example, a protein that it is more common in the cancer cell than in the healthy cells. One of the example, IB6, it's a protein, IB4, which is a protein that is expressed in 90% of lung cancer cells. So now we know that this is the target. We know that if our missile sees IB4, we'll attack it. In order to identify targets, AI will make that process that usually was taking years, will take months.
Look, actually, I can envisage a scenario where AI technology and mRNA technology could be used to cure cancer. Just don't think I want it in the hands of the people that profited from the pandemic and who likely participated in the pandemic being as severe as it was and used to legitimize authority in the manner. Back to Ashley Rinsberg's reporting. The most powerful move came behind closed doors. On February the 1st, 2020, Anthony Fauci held a secret call with some of the world's top virologists, including Jeremy Farrar, a British science official with ties to MI5. Before that call, these scientists privately admitted that COVID-19 looked engineered and was likely from a lab. Christian Anderson, a top virologist, wrote to Fauci saying the virus seemed inconsistent with evolutionary theory. That's a pretty significant claim from a scientist. This doesn't seem like it evolved naturally in the way that you claim that it does. It seems like it's kind of been created in a lab. What, like the
And that was before the pandemic was even declared.
Monster Mash, or like my King Penguins? No, I suppose more like the Monster Mash. I love that song. It was a graveyard smash. Then, within days, they changed their story. The same scientists who thought that COVID-19 had leaked from a lab suddenly drafted a paper dismissing the idea. That paper, later published in Nature Medicine, became the media's key piece of scientific evidence against lab leak. At the same time, Fauci and Farrar worked with Peter Daszak, the man who personally funneled US taxpayer money into the Wuhan lab, to publish another letter in The Lancet. Here is Peter Daszak, one of those names that we all know now because of independent media reporting during the pandemic that helped us to understand that taxpayer money was being used directly in Wuhan and that Anthony Fauci had peculiar relationships with groups like DARPA. Here is Daszak.
Which, anyway.
Conspiracy theories, the pointing of the finger at China, and just this sort of politicization that means...
The pointing of the finger at China, the claim that I lack charisma, all of it is sickening to a fellow like me.
Countries clamp up, and it's really unfortunate because what we need right now is open communication with scientists across the world. China's done a lot to deal with this virus.
They've done a lot.
They know a lot about how to control it. We need access to that information, and talking in political terms about this outbreak closes down that access.
I like China. Look at my pictures on wall. China. See that one? China. See that one? China. I like China.
What I resent most of all is the kind of haughty assumption of superiority, the didactic tone.
We're talking down to you, you idiots, you racists. You said this about China. You'll prevent international cooperation.
There was international cooperation going on. That's what conspiracy actually means.
Yep.
They know a lot about how to control it. We need access to that information, and talking in political terms about this outbreak closes down that access.
Now, men like Jay Bhattacharya, new purported head of the NIH, pending confirmation, and Marty Makary, same for FDA, were outspoken critics of Peter Daszak and many of his assumptions, and the Barrington Declaration, of which Jay Bhattacharya was a signatory and author, was one of the key.
God, this was like early on during the pandemic, but with Peter Daszak, like I would mention his name often because like I knew that like there's so much money that people like him have to invest in censoring that information from getting out there because he wanted to be anonymous essentially, and so it was really hard to get information on him because again it was censored, and but he was paying for it, so it was my way of at least making them pay for being fucking criminals. In my
pivotal moments in the pandemic period where opposing yet legitimate scientific voices vocally opposed government policy and the official narrative that we were all supposed to swallow and ingest along with as many vaccines as possible. Have you had your 19th booster yet? That it was of natural origin and therefore kind of God's fault rather than it came from a lab and it was corporatized science's fault. There was a letter signed by 27 signatories declaring that questioning COVID-19's origin was conspiracy theorizing and harmful. The scientists presented themselves as neutral experts, like Daszak is there, like a neutral expert, rather than someone with a vested interest. The ultimate neutral expert is, of course, let me know in the comments and chat, Fauci. The scientists presented themselves as neutral experts, but in reality had many direct ties to the Wuhan lab. None of these conflicts were disclosed. The media ran with it. CNN, The Guardian, The New York Times, NPR, Slate, The Washington Post, 60 Minutes, Wired, Associated Press, Bloomberg News, CBS News, Science Magazine, The LA Times, NBC News, Vox, Now This, ABC News, The Atlantic, The New Yorker, all cited Daszak as an authoritative source. Not one of them questioned his deep financial and professional ties to the Wuhan
Canada too.
Institute of Virology. So how does legacy media work? You heard that litany of names. Can you ever trust the legacy media again? No wonder press passes are being given to independent media now rather than legacy media stooges and liars. This at least is a positive early sign out of the Trump administration. Would you agree? Let me know in the comments and chat. Meanwhile, actual experts who supported investigating lab leak were ignored. The New York Times repeatedly cited Stanford microbiologist David Ryman over 20 times, Harvard epidemiologist Mark Lipstick 64 times, and Yale immunobiologist Akiko Iwasaki 67 times on pandemic-related issues. But when it came to COVID's origins, silence. The message was clear. There's only one acceptable answer. That's how the media support and amplify official narratives. Lots of techniques were used to control opposition, smearing opponents. I know a thing or two about that. So does Jay Bhattacharya. So does Joe Rogan. There was a variety of smears. One of the common smears was, "You're racist." Here's Apoorva Mandavali calling the lab leak theory itself racist. Someday we will stop talking about the lab leak theory and maybe even admit it's racist, but alas, that day is not here yet.
I just
totally got a terrible cough. You have not got a cough. That's racist. For years, journalists, researchers, and everyday people who asked basic questions were silenced, censored, and deplatformed. Yeah. Evidence was...
Oh my God. I know it's a lot of story time for me, so I'm sorry for that, but like it just reminds me of during COVID too, same thing. There was a guy that like he's well connected. I won't say too much about him, but like security companies, and but during COVID, there was a building again where there were masks being made, and he was making so much money of selling these masks within Ottawa and even like beyond, and so there was definitely a bias, and I've worked with him on security contracts and stuff like that, and we've done like I've like he's taught like he's invited me multiple times for meetings and stuff like that, where like it was more like consultation. I was giving him like kind of like consulting services, but more for free, right? And but again, it was to expand and establish that contact and anyways, but through all this, because he was Black, he was calling me fucking racist, and I remember, it just like I remember I was on Signal with him, and we were talking, and he was on his way from Florida, and saying that he was kind of like getting more like awake, I guess, with everything that was going on, and so I don't know where he landed, but yeah, like I was telling him, like because again, it came to the point where there was the accusations of me being a racist. I'm not a fucking racist. Ridiculous. But it's so weird how that stuck to a lot of people, where they were anyone that was talking about the mandates or the lockdowns, or these forced inoculations that were pushed on us because of emergency use authorization, despite the fact that there was already medical interventions that were available for people, including ivermectin and hydrochloroquine and so many other things that were available to make it where people would be less symptomatic. And we were labeled as anti-science, all of these different bullshit terms, and it worked. It worked at all levels of society.
Destroyed. China erased key data and blocked investigation.
And it's frustrating because, again, like I had known that guy for a few years at that point, and we had a great relationship. And because of mainstream media and fake corporate scientists like that, it worked. It was such a good propaganda campaign.
The public was manipulated into believing that lab leak wasn't just unlikely, it was immoral to even suggest. Then when the lab leak theory refused to die, the media tried to rewrite history. They blamed Trump derangement syndrome, claiming they dismissed lab leak because Trump politicized it. But this is another lie. The biggest moves in the propaganda campaign, Fauci's secret call, the Lancet letter, the media's first attacks, happened before Trump had said a single word about lab leak. In early 2020, Trump was still praising China's handling of the virus. The cover-up was already in full swing. Now the CIA has quietly reversed this assessment, but the damage is done. The world was misled. The media protected the Chinese government, American public health bureaucrats, and their own credibility at the cost of truth. This wasn't a mistake. It was the greatest propaganda victory in modern history. That's why we have to at least be somewhat circumspect when Trump pulls out of the WHO. That's why we have to be at least somewhat heartened when the Trump press secretary grants passes to independent journalists. And that's why we have to be deeply cynical.
And speaking of journalists, I just brought that up. Like another reason why we were meeting during COVID time as well is because we were looking at getting me teaching the hostile environment awareness training or the SRDTs, but the HEAT courses to, I think it was CTV. And so like I was all over that, right? But then because of COVID and me not being vaccinated and stuff like that, again, it just didn't land. And they're likely still not doing that training. I don't think any mainstream media is doing that training, but they should be, because again, people go all over Canada and all over the world, and they're not properly equipped or trained.
When Albert Bourla claims that mRNA and AI in his hands could solve the world's king problem, or king of diseases, or emperor of toxicity, whatever he called it, cancer itself. We have to be extremely cautious about who we trust. And on the list of people we can't trust, well, let's repeat that list with some of the people that willingly lied. The Guardian, New York Times, NPR, Slate, Washington Post, 60 Minutes, Wired, Bloomberg, CBS. The list goes on. Many of them are members of the Trusted News Initiatives. All of them work collegiately and cohesively to bring down any dissenting voices, sometimes even smearing them and attacking them with the vilest allegations or claims of racism if they dare to oppose the official narratives that they're financially invested in holding up. That's why we must support independent media, independent thinking, and that's why we must awaken together. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and the chat? Remember.
Okay, this was so good. And again, it just it feels good to be to have a whole bunch of people validated, including people like Helen Gruss that are still in the courts because she's a friggin' hero. And again, on the front lines, blue on blue, she was someone that was investigating possible links between the COVID inoculation and sudden infant deaths within Ottawa. And instead of being given accommodations and awards and promoted and all that other stuff, she was instead vilified as well. And yeah, and I had worked with her on contracts too with SRDTs. She was hired because of her expertise and professionalism. And so I have nothing but great things to say about her. And she was suspended, and the charges initiated on the 29th of January, 2022. So this was like the first weekend of the Freedom Convoy. And she was someone that was way more connected, way more aware of the reality of what was actually going on with the crisis actors and obviously the plants and the embeds and the disruptors, et cetera, people trying to elicit emotional responses in people and targeting things like homeless people or certain infrastructure like war monuments or the Terry Fox, or Parliament, right? It's very strategically coordinated. And then even I talk about Brian Fox and Marco Menich. It was a fucking circus. But I was also saying, we like that January 6th, it was going to be it will be very similar to January 6th and the events that unfolded there, and how even now people are still very misinformed about what actually happened during January 6th, right? Where there was even people within government that lied under oath, like that facilitated investigations to put people in jail, innocent people in jail, or charged, lives ruined. And it's all coming out finally now. Why? Because now there's less, believe it or not, less censorship in the media. Now that the people or the organizations that were heavily funded, that were definitely more leftist, more radical, more socialist leaning, and again, people that had a lot of influence from places like Europe. I'm talking about Soros and Schwab, and Bill Gates is American, but again, he's like all over the friggin' world. And anyways, funding, like USAID was funding leftist media. Klaus Schwab, no, it's Soros. Sorry, Soros. He's bought again, like more media outlets, like radio stations within the U.S. And again, a lot of donors to Senate and Congress are from leftist organizations that are pushing a lot of propaganda internationally. So 5,000 FBI agents worked on January 6th case. I could talk about David Lazarus and Larry Dunn and countless others that I've identified as lying, and again, countless others, but look at my Rumble videos for that. It's a huge rabbit hole. Oh, and I guess
some more. Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, New York, Atlantic City, Levittown, Cohoes, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for the link for the cheapest tickets. Holy S. the FBI just revealed that 5,000 out of their 13,000 agents were focused on January 6th protesters. That's 39% of the entire bureau
Oh my God.
were focused on hunting down and building cases against the January 6th protesters. That's not.
And there were a couple hundred government plants, at least. I'm saying more, and dozens that were FBI agents, off duty and on duty, that were also eliciting emotional response in people. We've shown videos of fake arrests, videos of them pushing people within the crowds, breaking windows. My goodness, it goes on.
Counting the amount of FBI people who were in the crowd that day.
Mm-hmm.
That's just so. Remember when? So this is congressman and former law enforcement.
So this is a reaction video because I have not seen this yet. I just like the title. I already know what he's going to say.
This is how many. He says conservatively, FBI and FBI assets were in the crowd creating that riot you saw. 99% of the people at January 6th were nonviolent. And that's why they showed this picture of the people inside the Capitol were still walking respectfully in between the ropes.
Do you think some of the agents are disguised as statues in there?
Right? So listen to what he says. How many? So 5,000. So almost 4 out of 10 FBI people were working on trying to get January 6 protesters. Almost half the agency was dedicated to that.
Yep.
A handful of people. And so watch what Clay Higgins
Sounds like Ottawa Police Services. No, I'm just kidding.
says. How many were actually in the January 6th?
We're gradually, professionally.
But I will say, though, there were people that were considered to be whistleblowers, even if they were not. They were just doing their jobs and reporting accurately. But people from all levels of government, CSIS, there are whistleblowers now even coming out saying, even to this day, that they were giving information to the cabinet and Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland that they were not listening to. They were not looking at. RCMP, same thing. Global Affairs Canada, like so many different organizations that are supposed to be, that are working for us. And but even at people at the top that were giving information, it was not utilized properly, to say the very least.
Rolling that evidence out.
You sort of answered the question right there in larger terms. You just said that elements within the federal government, I assume law enforcement, intel, and military, and I'm using your words, lured Americans to Washington into what you called a trap.
Yes, sir.
That guy said 200, at least, because conservative number, 200 FBI and FBI assets were in the crowd inciting people to do stuff, and they were inside the Capitol before the riot started, dressed as MAGA supporters. There were police, took off their uniforms, put on MAGA stuff inside the Capitol. So now my big question is, here's my big question to you, Kurt.
Yeah.
So if the FBI is going to go through all this trouble, because all this is to try to discredit Trump's political movement. So they wanted to get Trump committing a crime of insurrection, which they couldn't. He was never charged with that because he didn't do that. But they tried. And that's why they did those other 4 cases that are completely bogus, made up. And in fact, Andrew Cuomo said it was garbage, the charges they brought against him in New York.
Of course, dude, Jimmy, not just that. You got all these people. These are the people that were willing to show up to protest. So now you got them all in one place and know where they are. You can put charges on them. They can never own guns again. It's like you're eliminating an entire chunk of movement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the plan
that's
is
right.
Like, we're going to eliminate the whole movement.
Peaceful people, peaceful protesters, and people that believed that the elections were rigged, and with strong arguments as to why they believed that it was rigged. Oh, my lighting is very, very bad. But even with the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop, the Russia friggin' hoax, like the scandal with that, and again, so much data from the right that was being not only censored, but people on the left media and political side, again, like a lot of things taken out of context, a lot of lies about things that were said and platforms and stuff like that. So there are people that are coming forward and saying that they would have voted differently had they had that information. And then the like the money laundering, like the connections with China and Ukraine and Biden's involvement with his son's workings and dealings and so many different other things. And also the fact that there were like 15, I guess, what was it this year? There was like a record number of voter turnout. And yet there was like 15 million less Democratic voters. And like, where do they go? So we have to look at, again, we have to look at people that are actually Americans, where there is some form of voter identification that's required, and so that's my thoughts on that. People that knew that information was being censored or deplatformed, etc. And Mark Zuckerberg has recently come out and admitted that, and he was saying it was because he was getting angry emails and he was getting harsh words, like, oh my god. But so like you decided to essentially assist in rigging an election because of that, because of harsh words. Okay. But anyway, hopefully he comes around. All the data mining he's done and selling to other organizations, and including Cambridge. Anyway,
move in one swoop.
And so they tried to get rid of Trump, didn't work. But then they put almost half the FBI on trying to dismantle his political organ or a movement. So my question is, why would they go through that much trouble to dismantle his political movement only to allow him to get power again? Why would they do that? Now, some people say, oh, it's just the Yankees versus the Cowboys, two sides of the deep state, or the Rockefellers versus the tech bros. That's what some people say. A little too simplistic of an explanation. So which ones were running the FBI? And why would, and because obviously the ones who were against Trump, let's say Trump is a cowboy. So obviously the Yankees were running the
That's
FBI.
An old designation. I don't think Yankee and Cowboy is still how it is. Those lines have shifted quite a bit because a lot of Yankees and Cowboys are together. That's the whole New World Order.
That's
section.
right. That's exactly right.
So, but if you follow CIA or FBI or people talk about being in it, they've been weeding, just like in Hollywood, just like your friends don't talk to you. Anybody that ain't going along with the thing got weeded out. They're not getting promoted. They're going to get driven out. Every industry, anyone who was qualified, there's no good people in the FBI. I don't believe that. But if you were someone that believed in the thing, you got weeded out enough so that we could do what we want for a long time.
Well,
and that's why they don't want the books opening.
And we even reported on the questionnaire that they gave to FBI employees, asking them, do you know anybody here who's sympathetic to MAGA? Do you know anybody here who's sympathetic to January 6th? And then they would they'd weed those people out.
And you're already trained to trust the system because you're trying to be in the FBI.
That's
you
right.
Never did drugs. That's like told us in school. Don't ever do any drugs because you can't work at the FBI or Secret Service. And so you're already a person that follows orders by nature, and you believe in it, though. You're not bad. And then you got to confront that. And like now, you're not going to get an A or your career, or you got to turn away.
So the people who were against Trump in the deep state were running the FBI, obviously, because they assigned half the FBI to go after him and his movement.
Let's say about 40% of them work for the deep state.
But the people who were running the FBI, so definitely all the people in charge. So then why would they then allow Trump to become president? Why wouldn't they, if they're willing to do that, if they're willing to lie, if they're willing to lie to the FISA court 17 times so they could get, if they're willing to do the dossier, which was they knew was a lie, they lied about Papadopoulos, they lied about the FBI constantly. Russiagate was one big conspiracy theory invented by the FBI in the Clinton campaign. If they're willing to do all that, why would the FBI then all of a sudden go, oh, well, I guess he won the election? Why would they do that?
He's driving them out.
What? But why would they allow that to happen? Is my question, Kurt.
The guy missed. The guy that shot missed. The other guy missed.
So that's what a lot of people said. They said, well, they tried to get him. They gave him a clear. They got this patsy. Boy, was that guy ever a patsy. They got this guy who has no social media presence, all scrubbed. Nobody knows anything about him. They let him get on the 3 different Secret Service people saw the guy. They let him
Yep.
climb on top of the roof of the building that the Secret Service was in. They let him get on top. They let him get a clear shot. He got at least three shots off. And so you're saying so a lot of people are saying
COG is the one. The COG is the thing behind the whole thing. Continuity of government. That's the one.
the
with that
continuity of government.
And that's where, like, for example, they did the Ollie North stuff with the Iran-Contra smuggling. It's called the Doomsday Wire. It's like how you communicate if there's a nuclear war. And so I keep thinking about that thing because Scott Ritter said, because I asked him about it, he goes, yeah, they think there's some kind of bunker that they're going to go to, but it's not there anymore. Those haven't been paid for in years. But I think something happened behind the scenes because just like that DNC thing where I'm like, they all look like robots not getting instructions anymore. So I don't know what is different that I above my pay grade to know. But
so that's
such a
So I mean,
such a power structure where you like Kamala can't have a conversation for 3 hours. She can't. They have to curate it. So she won't say anything that she actually thinks ever. And to get promoted in that system for how long now? You had to be like that. So now whoever's given the orders to the people to do that, the orders aren't coming. I don't know why. And I don't know. It is two factions of deep state. Don't ever think it's not.
And this should outrage you as an American citizen to find this out. If you're not outraged that the FBI is not there to uphold democracy or law and order, they're there to actually go against the democracy. The people elected Donald Trump the first time. They tried to undercut him at every turn, lied to the FISA court, tapped his phone, did Russiagate. The generals in Syria lied to him about troop numbers. He was being lied to constantly, and he was being effed with by the FBI, and Chuck Schumer admitted that the CIA and the FBI doesn't work for the president.
That's right.
And so now we don't know who they work for. So this should outrage you. This should outrage you because if they can do this, because like I tried to explain to Cornel West, if they can do this to Donald Trump, someone who's super popular as a populist leader, they could do it to anybody. And they will do it to anybody.
They did it to Cornell.
And they did. I'm sure they did.
You didn't want to be president.
They'll do it to Bernie Sanders. They'll do it to Jill Stein. They'll do it to Cornel West. They'll do it to anybody who the establishment doesn't like. That's why this matters. That's why Russiagate always mattered. That's why it always mattered. Because that's what they'll do. So these are the real criminals. That's who the FBI should have been looking for. Those people. So here's the article. FBI provides the Trump Justice Department. And so this would not have come out if Donald Trump didn't become president. You wouldn't know how corrupt your FBI is. You would not know.
Everyone.
If Kamala Harris won the presidency, this would never have come out.
Yep.
And by the way, it's not going to be reported the way it should be that, hey, your intelligence agencies are actually the criminals. They're actually the rogues. They're actually the people undermining democracy, not Donald Trump. They're not going to report it that way.
That they made COVID with your money?
That they made COVID with your money.
Trump's in that.
Yeah.
FBI provides the Trump Justice Department with details about 5,000 employees who worked January 6 cases. The FBI complied with the order from the President Trump's Justice Department. So who had that on your bingo card? The Justice Department and the FBI would be adversaries and fighting against each other. Isn't that nice?
They used to be.
And they provided Department of Justice officials with the information about more than 5,000 employees who worked on investigations related to the January 6, 2021 riot. So they're calling it the riot, not the insurrection, at the U.S. Capitol, according to the multiple reports. The demand made by acting Deputy Attorney General Emily Bove last week, Emil Slamazel, Hots and Peppers Corporated. Emil Bove last week sparked concern and triggered lawsuits, arguing that because they want to cover up their corruption. It sparked lawsuits arguing that the list could put the safety of FBI agents and their families at risk.
You don't care about the people that you targeted, that you put at risk, that are still in, oh my God. And
However,
no one wants to come after anyone. Everyone just wants accountability. Like, people are trying to sue. People are, they're using the justice system. They're using their media platforms.
Information furnished by the Bureau does not include employee names. And that's according to CNN.
You just want the truth. That's it.
On Tuesday.
Oh, wow. You can say the Doge nerds that work on Doge, but we're not going to find out who's behind this.
That's right. We're not allowed to find out the corrupt FBI people who are undermining democracy. Well, we can find out a couple of tech nerds who are trying to do an audit of the Treasury Department, ordered by the President of the United States, who just got elected. On Tuesday, 9 FBI agents filed a class action lawsuit against the Justice Department in response to the request, alleging that Acting Attorney General James McHenry and other Department of Justice officials were retaliating against them by distributing surveys asking about their involvement in cases against Trump and his supporters in order to be terminated or to suffer the adverse employment action.
You should be. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of getting fired and being held accountable. That's why the names need to come out. It's to shame. It's to hold people accountable. It's not rules for me and not for thee. Wrong. I said that completely backwards. Rules for thee, not for me. I'm trying to talk to myself as if I'm not these agents and stuff like that. But like, even people like within cabinet, within Congress, within Senate, anyone that's involved in corruption and conspiracies that were also involved in the January 6th staged and planned event should be named, publicly shamed, and fired. And the reason why, again, with the public shaming, it's to hold the whole department accountable. And also, it's going to impact their being hired as well. So good luck with that. You ruin a lot of people's careers, a lot of people's lives. Karma. And I say the same thing for Ottawa Police Services, and I have a lot of respect. And I absolutely believe that we need law enforcement and military and the organizations we have, but they need to be much less corrupted and a lot more critical thinkers in these departments that are willing to go against unlawful orders when they come around. Like, for example, the Emergency Act being declared. And there are people within the legal system, lawyers, people seem to hate on lawyers, but they're necessary, unfortunately, in first world countries. They're literally what drives the countries more so than anything, I think. And when you have people like Brendan Miller, so many other lawyers that are fighting the good fight, and judges as well, like Judge Mosley, who did declare the Emergency Act to be unlawful and unconstitutional. There are, like, that's where changes are made, right? And like, whatever you want to say about it, it's not with the protests or anything like that. It's within the justice system. It's within the judicial branch and that stuff. And so lawyers do have a very tough job, and it's a very important job. And no, I'm not paid to say that. And judges as well. But unfortunately, there's a lot of influence by these propaganda and psyops campaigns that a lot of people are, again, they're just drinking the Kool-Aid, unfortunately.
The agents asserted that, quote, even if they are not targeted for termination, they may face other retaliatory acts such as demotion, denial of job opportunities, or denial of promotions in the future.
Like the people, you did that to other people.
And yeah, if you're doing nefarious crap, and now the current Department of Justice doesn't want you to do it, doesn't want to reward that behavior.
Yeah,
I don't see how that's illegal.
Like the terminated people that didn't have the vaccine.
Or
why not people that are corrupted?
Worthy of a lawsuit.
Hey, you can watch me take a shit every day. Why can't I watch you?
That's right. In a separate Tuesday filing in D.C. federal court, the FBI's union, they have a union, and other anonymous Bureau employees asked for a temporary restraining order. They don't want the Department of Justice to know which FBI people of the 5,000 were working on the January 6th protesters to dismantle the MAGA movement. They don't want anybody to know that. I wonder why they don't want people to know that.
Oh, because you could probably pick them out in the video once you have certain information.
Publication of the details of any of the agents' involvement in the probes would violate their First Amendment rights and the Privacy Act of 1974, as well as due process. That's what the lawsuits allege.
Did
Really?
Rolling Stone pick this up like they did the Doge story?
Really?
Karma.
That seems kind of crazy. If that's true, if those lawsuits are what they're alleging, if that's true, that seems crazy.
See, this is why I think they're going to dump real information about JFK, because it's to Trump's advantage to put that out and make people distrust them even more, because they're going to try to wiggle out of getting audited. But think of the anger when Epstein stuff comes out. I'm with you about, like, what do you mean it's close? Just dump it on him. But I'll bet it's strategically being dumped for this.
So here is the guy who's the head of the House committee who's supposed to take care of this. Listen to this.
To the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau within the federal government.
Well, you know, I'm chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee in Judiciary, and we're going to dig into this stuff. The FBI, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, DEA, most of the folks working in these agencies are good people that are working on the street. But the people at the top, what they did, wanting to implant people in traditional Roman Catholic churches. This is what the FBI did, creating and working to create the Steele dossier, which was a complete lie, working with a guy by the name of Igor Danchenko, giving him hundreds of thousands of dollars, using his lies to go after President Trump. Again,
they do. Even Hitler. I'm not saying that they're like Hitler, but I'm just saying that he even used people as plants in religious institutions all over Europe, but especially in Germany, where they were informants to him. And you look at USAID again, like their major funders. Sorry, they gave a lot to NGOs, obviously, but religious groups like a Catholic organization as well. Like they were the largest contributors of USAID from like 2000, one of the top from like 2013 to 2022. But again,
horrible thing. Going after parents and school boards, terrible. Misusing FISA. They misused FISA going after people they didn't agree with. They misused FISA going after boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, and wives millions of times.
So that's Jeff Van Drew. He's the chairman of the House Judiciary Subcommittee.
I suspect it's not Cowboys and Yankees anymore. It's the battle of fascist versus pervert. And there's a lot of overlap between the two. There's a real revolving door between the fascist and pervert factions.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, why the FBI would put so much energy into dismantling MAGA and then just go ahead and let it happen. Because it's the same people who were trying to dismantle MAGA were the same people who let Trump become president. So they didn't switch from dismantling MAGA's movement and Trump's election. Those are the same people in charge, the same people running things, the same people putting five. So that didn't switch. So that doesn't make sense.
Well, that shows you the extent of their power. Look, a pyramid structure is everybody has a certain level of power. So there's a lot of lawfare crap. Do you understand?
Yeah.
There's no they couldn't find real crimes. So they literally couldn't find them. They didn't make them up. So it's a very complicated operation, and they have to maintain a semblance of this is legal what we're doing. So people tried to kill him, so that's the extra legal means. The FBI is not the top of the heap with that. COG, what can COG get away with? And then they all probably answer to something worse at the top, is my guess.
And COG stands for continuance of government, which you're not allowed to talk about even in congressional hearings.
Nancy Pelosi brought it up herself when Trump was sick with COVID. She goes, "Don't worry, we got COG." It's the only time I've ever seen them voluntarily bring it up was Nancy Pelosi doing it when Trump got COVID.
So there you go. Either way, I don't know if we'll ever know the answer as to why the FBI allowed Trump to become president when they were so committed to dismantling his movement and stopping him.
Because they're not in charge.
No,
that's why.
Kurt, how many times I got to explain this? The same people who did Russiagate, the same people who put 5,000 people on the January 6th to dismantle MAGA were still running the FBI when Trump got elected.
Right.
So now they're not in charge. Now. But they were in charge when he got elected. So that's the question. The question is, if they would put so much energy into dismantling MAGA, why would they then just let him become president? because it's the same people. So now they're being dismantled.
Right.
The FBI now that Trump is in control.
Okay, I'm saying a different thing. I'm saying the people above them giving it like 5,000 people on it. That's orders from above.
You
So
don't
the
think that comes from the top of the FBI?
I think they're taking orders from somebody above them, such as COG. The Secret Service, why they security strip him? Why is that lady from COG, that the one that brought Cheney the bunker, Kimberly Cheadle? COG. So I don't know what fell apart with COG, but I bet you that's what the dismantling is, because the FBI's muscle. They're not the brains of it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like USAID, I had no idea was bigger than all of them.
USAID
got more money.
More money than the CIA and the FBI combined.
Yeah, like that really genuinely surprised me. So I don't know, like the people in charge, I think it has to do with NGOs and all that kind of WEF stuff. They're working for the New World Order. So whoever's the top of that, it's probably people you never heard of. You didn't elect them, that's for goddamn sure.
Yep.
I want to share a little.
Yeah, so very interesting. So much is coming out. But again, it like Trump had to be in power in order for it to come out, or at least not people that are currently residing in or were residing in cabinet, Senate, and the Democratic Party, especially. We'll get into our stories. This is a throwback yesterday of me on a fishing boat in New Brunswick last summer. Okay, so large quantities of fentanyl and cocaine seized in Peterborough, Ontario. So this is life in Canada. Enough fentanyl to kill 750,000 people. And so again, there's a lot of good work being done to get it off the streets.
Can someone who knows more than me help me out with this one? So I've been using usaspending.gov to look into the USAID spending over the last 4 years, because cracking open the USAID scandal changes the game. It is the story right now. And Americans are learning about all kinds of crazy government programs that we've been funding. But we're also learning about all kinds of organizations and NGOs and nonprofits that we didn't know we didn't even know existed. Okay, disregard the filter that TikTok just put on me for the last like 10 clips. And in the data here, I noticed that when you sort it by the size of payment, the largest payment, $6 billion, is to Chemonics International Inc., and then Pfizer. But then there's more Chemonics International Inc., and then there's more Chemonics International Inc., then there's more Chemonics International Inc., then there's more Chemonics International Inc., and more Chemonics International Inc. And I'm hoping that some of you already know about Chemonics and can give us some leads and get the ball rolling of what the hell this is. When you dig into the sub-awards that they're giving out, it's basically all just transporting pharmaceutical products all around the world to all sorts of developing nations. Looks like it's mostly AIDS drugs, which is an insane amount of money. Side note, can anyone describe to me why the AIDS epidemic is such a problem in Africa? Like, are they all doing heroin? Are they all having butt sex? Why is AIDS everywhere in Africa? Is it just from poor sanitation? Or is it possible that we're not being told the whole story about the AIDS epidemic? Because
cancer.
But anyways, Chemonics International has earned $1.8 billion just in the last 12 months. But in all fiscal years, it looks like $17.3 billion. When you go to their website, their board of directors page no longer exists, which is kind of sus. But when you plug it into archive.org, you can get access to their board of directors as of 2024. And they don't seem like crazy sus. They seem kind of like nobodies, with a few exceptions that have worked in like big tech and big mech.
Okay, but how about foundations? Because I've talked about foundations. USAID largely funded foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm sure the Rockefeller Foundation. I'm sure Soros's Foundation. I'm sure ones like that. But just like a simple Google search, Chemonics International and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have worked together on projects to improve global health, supply chains, and agricultural development. So very interesting. Oh, farmers markets too. Nice. Nice. Again, it's all coming out.
Can someone who knows?
Leaked documents from the BC Ministry of Health have confirmed that dozens of pharmacies in the province are complicit in a scheme to sell opioids on the black market to be sold in Canada and around the world. And so I was saying here that every province in Canada has pharmacists without proper credentials and greedy legit ones selling prescription drugs on the black market. Investigate Ontario and Quebec. They are worse, or where it's worse. That's true, but again, this is all coming out. So this still. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio just deemed that only 294 USAID staffers are necessary out of the 14,000. And if you actually look on their site, they're saying that it's down, and that most people are they're on administrative leave, except for people that have critical roles. So deem that only 294 staffers necessary to 14,000. Picture is worth 1,000 words. I've shared this. Other people have as well, but you've got some people that are maybe terrorists. I don't know, but USAID. Nice. USAID funneled $27 million to Black Lives Matter through the Tides Foundation. And so they're not going to fund, it's all so politicized that, again, they're funding leftist protests. And with the BLM protests, again, this was not only heavily funded, but there were there were people from within that were organized activists and protesters that were eliciting emotional response in people and making this more violent than what it should have been. And there was so much damage, especially in places like Portland, and police precincts being taken over, buildings being burned, so many injuries, cops being targeted. It was just a friggin' mess. And this is what taxpayers were funding, despite the fact that taxpayers were also on the hook for the rebuild. USAID was funding over 6,200 journalists across 707 media outlets and 279 media NGOs, including 9 out of 10 media outlets in Ukraine. I keep on saying this stuff, but it's just nice to see that this stuff is finally coming out, because then people like me that have been saying this since the beginning, we're not. Anyways, it's coming out. Yeah, so some more points on that. I'm going to share a little bit of Stu Peters, even though, again, I don't agree with everything that he says and who he blames for events. But he does share a lot of good content as well. Actually, I might get off YouTube. Actually, wait.
There are child sex traffickers and satanic pedophile cults all over the world, and many of them, as we have reported here many times in the past, have ties to our government or other governments like it, as well as to the financial and political power brokers who keep those governments afloat. And a whole lot of this, especially when it comes to kids being snatched up by elite pedophile networks, is centering around Latin America. To be more specific, it's centering around Guatemala. The age of consent in Guatemala is 14. The odds of rich foreigners with ties to their governments actually being criminally charged for having sex with children are less than 1 in a million in Guatemala. And vulnerable children who are on their way to America's southern border have been known to disappear in droves. We've covered all of this. Just recently, as a matter of fact, we covered a massive story out of Guatemala where a Jewish sect called Lev Tahor was found living in a compound deep in the jungle where they were raping children and breeding child sex slaves with underage forced brides that they had brought in from the United States and elsewhere. Guatemalan authorities raided that compound. They liberated over 160 tortured women and children who had faced years of unspeakable abuse at the hands of these disgusting Jewish pedophiles. And these big-nosed freak shows were so intent on keeping control of their victims.
He just says like the wildest things sometimes. And again, this has nothing to do with race or religion or anything like that. It's individuals all over the world, but more importantly, like again, like right on our front porch that are committing these acts.
That listen to this. The ones who weren't taken directly to jail went as far as to launch a raid on the safe house that their victims had been taken to. They clashed with police. They tried ramming themselves through the front gate and breaking down the doors. They even broke some of their victims out and recaptured them, albeit briefly. Fortunately, these women and children were quickly recovered by the police. Now, this situation is currently under investigation. But these perverted leaders of this Jewish community are expected to face prison time. And as a matter of fact, just days ago, one of these leaders was picked up by police and is expected to be shipped off to Mexico to face a laundry list of criminal charges. But this is just one example. And it's not just the jungle Jews who are trafficking and abusing and raping kids in Guatemala. Guatemala has become a hotspot for globally connected criminals, especially pedophiles and human traffickers who provide those pedophiles with these children. Think back to my interview with Guatemala's general secretary. That man explained to us that child trafficking in Guatemala is an endemic and that it has direct ties to the United States government, massive ties. And this, of course, is thanks in large part to the human trafficking industry that's propped up by America's wide open southern border. Because of its position in Central America relative to America's open border, Guatemala has become a hub for the worst people on earth. Government-aligned and funded, taxpayer-funded NGOs have descended onto the place alongside agents from the U.S. government and abroad who claim that they're in Guatemala on humanitarian missions. Yeah, we're here to help these kids. That's what we've all been told. And they do it under the guise of officials from the United States government who are here to help. And of course, they do it under the guise of being involved with some sort of a religious good doer organization.
Yeah, and people get duped and they believe they're doing good. And the majority of people do think that they're there to help.
But in reality, they're working right alongside the human traffickers. They're working right alongside the people who are ferrying slaves in and out for labor and for drug trade and for sex. They come up through Central America, over the U.S. border with Mexico, so they can be housed in taxpayer-funded facilities before they just disappear into the wind and likely into an early grave. Children from all over the world have flooded into Latin America. Children with no parents, children with no guardian, no one to look out for them or act as their protector. These are children who have been sent with nothing more than the shirt on their back because their parents have been convinced falsely that if they just make it to the United States border, they'll be able to stay. All will be okay, and they'll be able to live a happy life in America, pursuing the American dream. But instead, they've been thrown right into the arms of human traffickers, right into the arms of pedophiles, right into the arm of government stooges who traffic children on the taxpayer dime. And we're not being hyperbolic. I have the receipts. That's what's awaiting these children when they get to these migrant camps of Latin America, to the gathering points, to the aid stations set up by NGOs like the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, all along the trek to the United States southern border, especially in Guatemala, which has served as this centralized rallying point for these people. And it's not just random kids from all around the world on their way to America who are being sold to the highest bidders. No, it's kids from Guatemala as well. Kids who are disappearing right off the streets. They're taken right directly out of their classrooms at their schools or from local charity events or humanitarian aid centers, which just so happen to be run by the United States government, run by the same NGOs who have now spent years having a field day south of the border. To put it quite simply, the United States government is trafficking children.
They're assisting with it. And not everyone.
It's one of the most prolific child trafficking organizations on the face of planet Earth. Just think about everything that we know about our own southern border. All of these children who have disappeared, all of these children who have been tossed into the backs of vans and driven off into the night or sent to live with some pedophile child trafficker deep inside of the U.S. interior. And why? Because that's what our government and the organizations that it gets in bed. Ryan Matta knows all about this. For years now, Ryan has been following this situation at the southern border throughout Latin America very closely. Ryan has produced multiple documentary films, all of which should be massively viral. Ryan has personally met with government officials, with high-level sources who have filled him in on the child trafficking scourge that has taken over Guatemala. They've also provided him with physical evidence of international pedophiles with direct ties to the United States government. We have them in our possession. We're going to show them to you momentarily. We're talking about high-ranking members of Team Kamala, for instance, who have traveled to Guatemala for the express purpose of tracking down vulnerable, helpless children and raping them.
I don't know about that. You need proof. Give us proof.
Yes, government officials are going to Guatemala to rape children. High-ranking government officials in the United States government, federal officials that are there to help, are going on vacations to rape children. These people are Satan incarnate. They're doing a whole lot more than just selling cheap labor to chicken plants or turning a blind eye as human traffickers commit unspeakable crimes. They are actually committing these unspeakable crimes themselves. These people that we're told are above us, the people that we're told are tasked with running our government, knowing better than we could ever know, are traveling to Guatemala on pedophile child rape vacations. They're raping and torturing and completely destroying little kids. And then they're coming back to the United States like nothing happened at all, like it's total normalcy, and then just walking around with total impunity. And
so I will say that when I have deployed in Afghanistan, when some people, when they would go to their HLTA or rest and refit, whatever you want to call it, they would go to places like Thailand. Certain people, not everyone, but there were considerable amount of soldiers that would. And it's known, obviously, for escorts and prostitution and stuff like that. And they would go to those places. And so he's not entirely wrong in that. He's not wrong. And he's calling it rape because it's, in his opinion, it's statutory rape because of the age of consent being so low. To him, he considers them to still be children, and so do I.
Next time that they get the urge, the next time that they want to go violate and murder childhood innocence, no problem. Just grab a flight to Guatemala and do it again.
And even in Quebec, a lot of people travel to Montreal, they travel to Quebec City. Because they know that the drinking age is 18, age of consent 18, and so they can go out into bars and clubs and strip clubs and stuff like that. And and if they're trying to target not target, but if they're trying to pick up younger women, they can go like at least 18.
This has been going on for a long time,
Whereas in the U.S., for example, the legal age of drinking is 21, so you're not going to find 18-year-olds unless they have fake ID and stuff like that. Anyway.
Long time. And it has been tracked in government documents, but absolutely nobody will do anything to stop it. Listen to this very closely. The United States Secret Service has records of American government elites raping kids in Guatemala. But they won't shut it down. They won't file charges. They won't do anything because they're all in on it. They're all complicit. Our government and the governments of the entire world, for that matter, are controlled by satanic, Kabbalistic pedophiles. These people do things to children that the normal human mind can't even comprehend. These people are demons. They are everything that we thought they were. They are everything that I have said they were, and so much more. And this information needs to be exposed. It needs to be out there for public consumption, and these people need to be named. They need to be named, and they're going to be. They need to be rounded up, and they're going to be. And they need to be dragged in front of a tribunal, swiftly convicted, and then dealt with in the most severe way possible, over and over and over again, until none of them are left. Because these people aren't really people at all. They're satanic, pedophile, demon, lizard things, and they're flying around.
I don't believe the satanic lizard conspiracies.
Into Guatemala to rape and torture kids, and then they get away with it. Until now.
So yeah, this is, again, there's so much information being exposed. And that should be talked about, even though it's hard to hear. And here we go. Is this the one? No, it's not the one I wanted to share. I was just looking at different USAID funding. Anyway, so Chairman Mast exposes outrageous USAID and State Department grants. This is from Foreign Affairs Committee. This was from the... Let's see if I can watch it. He's going to... None of that funding going to help with child soldiers or human trafficking or organ harvesting. None of that stuff. No. Must be nice. And how much rebuilding done in East Palestine, in Lahaina, in California, in North Carolina, so many different places. Again, people are like, it's just so appalling to me. Yeah. A little bit. So yeah, that's a good note to stop on. I wish we would do the same thing in Canada. And anyways, sorry, screen open up. On that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.